Preston Guy joins the show every Friday here at Second Segment. He does so now, of course, TigerBait.com. Preston Guy on Twitter at PGuy77. Preston, I feel like you and I have been doing this a lot lately, so great to chat with you again, man. How are you?
Man, I'm just so happy to be here on the Matt Musso show every Friday. Someone has to work on Fridays, and I guess that's why they call me and you in, right?
Yeah, we draw the short straw there, don't we? Normally on the whole Friday. Preston, I'll tell you, our building over here empty. Like just there's nobody here. It's 1 o'clock Memorial Day weekend. Yeah, they're long gone.
Is Jonah coming in after this?
Yeah, no, he's here. He's here. He will always be here. Yes, exactly. That guy. Man, sometimes I think he'd rather work than sleep. All right, Preston, let's talk some LSU football. You know, I was perusing Twitter on Thursday night and came across one from you about LSU's running backs and the running game. And you went back from when Brian Kelly got hired and Josh Williams, Logan Diggs, Caden Durham. Those are the three that you highlighted because they had the most yards. Obviously, 2 of those years you had Jayden Daniels, and you noted that, man, without Jayden Daniels, you need the metric to improve for LSU in the running game. So my question to you is, we've already seen 1 year without Daniels, and that's Caden Durham, obviously. Now you're replacing everything on the offensive line for starters. Why are we to believe that LSU's run game will improve in 2025?
Well, I'll tell you what, it was mostly 4 of the same guys all 3 years. And for Brian Kelly's first 3 years, no running back ran for more than 753 yards. And, of course, Jayden Daniels, of course, the first couple years took a lot of that away from the running backs. But last year, Caden Durham, your leading rusher at 753, not ideal given that basically outside of running backs, your team contributed about 40 yards rushing. You were good for 107th in the country last year in your rushing offense. And, you know, then I look at it, and of the top 20 offenses, the lowest rated rushing offense was 73 in terms of scoring offenses, right? So if you run the ball at least above average, now for the most part, most of these offenses were well into the top 50 on the scoring offenses, but you know, Indiana was as low as 73. If you want to score points, you need to run the ball, right? And you can't be a team ranking in the hundreds and just rely on this pass-happy offense. You need to eventually convert and get those tough yards and get your offense moving at a good rate. I personally believe that reflects more on the offensive line than the running backs that they've had, albeit the running backs have not been great. I don't believe LSU's had a stud running back in the last 3 seasons. I think they've had serviceable, good players back there, but no one who's really, you know, great per se. I think Caden Durham has a good chance to be great this year, and maybe Trey Holly in the mix, who knows, has a chance to do his thing. And then I really like Harlem Berry as a true freshman. So I think this is a good running back room in terms of talent. Maybe not as much depth as they've had the last few years, but I think it's probably the most talented running back room that they've had. And look, nothing in spring suggested that the offensive line will be improved. However, I will suggest that most of the starting offensive line was just the returning guys, and they're clearly waiting to work in all these portal and newcomers that are coming. And I think the newcomers are the ones with the most talent. If anything else, if you just want hope that they will improve in run blocking, just noting that it is 4 different guys than the guys who struggled to block for running backs for the last 3 years. Hopefully that at least makes you feel good. Now, that says nothing about their pass blocking because that unit was elite at pass blocking, but there's your hope if you're looking for some.
With the offensive line, maybe putting them in a different scheme, mixing some different things in, finding what they're comfortable with. I mean, where is LSU really kind of there? Because I don't disagree with you. Like, LSU's had talented enough running backs to put forth maybe you don't have that guy the last 3 years that's going to go for, 1,400 yards or whatnot, but you have guys that you could get to that number with. And the offensive line run blocking last year, it was a disappointment, especially all the talk that we heard about it going into the season. So, I mean, is it more figuring out what they're comfortable with or training them up better?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, you got to have more diverse coaching with these guys. I mean, run blocking and pass blocking are just such opposite moves. A lot of people think that it's a block is a block, and it's literally a pass block. You're going backwards, and a run block, you're stepping forward. And I would like to see more physical run game elements added, not as like part of your bread and butter offense. I don't want you lining up on 1st and 10 after the kickoff and running a toss dive every time. However, situationally, I would love to see some counter tray where you've got, guards pulling. I'd love to see some situation. And granted, look, pulling last year was not a strength of the offensive line. When they did it, they were pretty bad at it. But I would like to see some under center, maybe a little bit of fullback help for them back there. Just implement a few packages of more power running offense, just situationally, to help you out. One of the things that was frustrating last year was how many RPOs you saw in the red zone, knowing that run option is basically non-existent when it's being called to Nussmeier as the run option, right?
Yeah.
So, I just think that for these short yardage situations, I would like to see that a little more often, you know what I mean, where you're not just reliant on out of shotgun, inside zone kind of stuff.
How much can Juwan Johnson maybe help with that in his package?
I think goal line, that'd be really nice, actually. I really like what I saw out of him in spring. Now, I don't think he's a guy who's going to be out there, reading defenses, like we were talking about right after the kickoff at the 25-yard line. But like Brian Kelly said, he can read a cover zero, and he can pass the ball well enough against man coverage in short yardage situations. Don't expect him to throw some touch on it and get it underneath and throw a dime in the corner of the end zone there. But, in terms of getting him rolling out, he's physical, by the way, too. He's not a thin kid whatsoever. He will lower his shoulder and get it in there. I would love to see you spice up your particularly your goal line stuff, right, with some Juwan Johnson packages. I think that would help out a lot.
Talking with Preston Guy, of course, staff writer, covers LSU football and recruiting over at TigerBait.com. You can get him on Twitter at PGuy77. Realistic expectation for Caden Durham in year 2?
Yeah, I don't want to put a number that's too high. I think we all would like to see him be a 1,000-yard rusher, right?
Yeah.
That being said, if he runs for 750, and then you look up and Trey Holly's running for 650, and then Harlem Berry's running for 550. It's like, okay, well, it's not that Caden Durham was bad this year. It's just you had more guys to share. I would like to see your running offense run for, say, 2,500 yards this year. That would put you in the top 25 or near the top 25. Last year, top 25 was 2,700 yards rushing. I would like to see about 2,500 total yards rushing. And if one guy doesn't hit that 1,000-yard mark, so be it. You know what I mean? But you need more out of your second and third guy if your first guy's not going to be a 1,000-yard rusher.
Some of the best rushing seasons LSU's had, have just been the running back by committee approach.
Mm-hmm.
You can go back through the years, especially during the Les Miles time. All right, you mentioned earlier you love Harlem Berry, and everyone seems to love Harlem Berry, not necessarily just from a running game perspective, but how much does he change LSU's offense?
Well, he's a dynamic receiver as well and really nimble with the ball in his hands. Caden Durham probably has more top-end speed, but, Harlem Berry probably is better at accelerating and getting to his top speed. He's very nimble, and understand in 7-on-7, he played wide receiver, and he played wide receiver well. So this is a guy who's going to be a dynamic threat out there. If you can get him in space and use him properly, you're going to have to be a little more creative. I don't think as a true freshman, he's going to be a guy who just takes inside zones and finds the hole, bounces off a tackle. You know what I mean? I think he's going to need some time to develop as a player before he's able to read and find the holes and read his blocks. He's going to need a little more time to develop physically before he's able to shred blocks. That being said, he can move and he can catch. You're going to have to design some ways to get him in space. I think Harlem Berry could be an X factor for this offense this coming season.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a great term, X factor, because he seems like that guy that while everything you said is like, yep, he needs to bulk up a little bit, develop, shed tackles, mature in that part of his game. But you also just look at him and you go, how are you going to keep that guy off the field? Just at certain points. Like, it feels like you're doing a disservice to yourself and your offense, which is wild because of all the talent and speed and agility and everything they have on that side, to not have Harlem Berry out there in some capacity during certain situations. So, I mean, I think that's one of the more fascinating things to keep an eye on throughout the summer and obviously the fall and heading into the season is just how they end up using him. Because Brian Kelly's like, he lives up to the 5-star billing. So that's going to be interesting. Switch sides of the ball with me, Preston, if you would, for a minute, because, LSU's worst unit last year were the safeties. I think we all know that. And they've done some extensive retooling there. Bringing in Halsey, bringing in Cooley, returning the guys that you did, young players. What do you think about the depth just in that room right now as they head into summer workouts?
Yeah, let me just rip off a few names, and I think it'd be somewhat agreeable that if this guy turned out to be a pretty good player this year, it wouldn't be shocking, right? Deshaun Spears.
Not at all.
Joel Rogers showed a lot of promise, right?
Yeah.
Then you're talking about Halsey and Jim Coyley. I mean, there's 4 names right there where, they ripped off and then an all-conference type season. You'd be like, okay, all right, that made sense. And then you throw in guys like Tamarcus Cooley in there. You throw in guys, Jordan Gilbert, maybe he's improved. I know he wasn't great last year, but he was your starting safety last year, and maybe some of those reps, and he's been able to improve a good bit. I mean, you just kind of get the feel for just how deep that room is just off of what I'm naming, and I'm a big fan of depth, especially for these positions like safety, DB, corner, D-line, that kind of, on defense in general, I guess, is where I'm really a big fan of depth. And there's a lot of it in a lot of these positions, and there's a reason why people are saying this is Brian Kelly's best roster he's had, despite having a team that had 3 first-round draft picks. We forget about it. In fact, in that 2023 offense, we also had Will Campbell, who was a top 5 pick as well. So you had 4 first-round draft picks, and people are still sitting here saying, yeah, this roster's better, though, because you're seeing how good this roster really is.
Yeah. The versatility of the safety room, I don't feel like might be being talked about enough because, I mean, you bring in a guy like Cooley, it feels like you can get a lot of them on the field at the same time, potentially. Cooley can play nickel as well. They played Deshaun Spears all over the field a year ago. I mean, do you kind of feel that as well, that it's maybe we're not talking about the versatility of that room enough?
Well, and more so than your safety room being versatile, your DB room is versatile.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we're not even talking about guys like Mansour Delane, who plays corner primarily. But watch his film. That guy wraps up and tackles. If he needs to go back there and play free safety, I have a lot of confidence. Jakeem Jackson is another guy I could see being very versatile, the transfer from Florida. DJ Pickett is a guy who they're working at corner, but he's got the body. He could play safety. So, yes, there's a lot of versatility. In fact, before you added Halsey, I really thought that they were going to have to move a corner to safety to make it work. Now we'll just see. Maybe there's a little bit of shuffling on both ways, and they just work to find an identity. They certainly have enough talented bodies out there to figure something out. There's no doubt about that.
Much different conversations we're having this season heading in as opposed to 2024. And these are much more fun. I enjoy having these conversations a lot more than the ones this time last year. Preston, we always appreciate the time, man. Y'all get him on Twitter at pguy77. Read his stuff over at tigerbait.com. I believe Hunt's back next Friday, so you'll be talking to Hunt. Yeah.
No. Well, I'll see you next week for the Musso show.
All right, Preston. We appreciate the time, man. Thank you.
All right, see you soon, Matt.
Hey, thanks for watching Hunt on LSU. Before you get out of here, do us a couple of favors. Hit that like button, leave your comments below, and subscribe to the channel for all your Fighting Tiger football talk. See you next time.